Now, there is no doubt about it that Snow White 2025 is considered by far one of the worst box office failures, not just with Disney, but also in the entire film history when it comes down to live-action remakes. We already know that it's right up there with, of course, Dragon Ball Evolution on the IMDb rating score.
What happens when Disney bets everything on a fairy tale reboot and ends up with a disaster that might haunt them for years? The 2025 Snow White live-action remake was supposed to be a magical triumph, a fresh take on a timeless classic. Instead, it's turned into a chaotic mess that's got everyone talking for all the wrong reasons. Buckle up, because this story's wilder than anything the Brothers Grimm could have dreamed up.
So with Snow White, let's go through this, right? There's no prince. Woman doesn't need a prince.
Oh, Lord.
Really? Okay, good
Shut
luck
up.
back then. It doesn't need a prince to save her, and not surrounded by 7 weird people. Oh, okay, just CGI fictional goblins, I guess.
Let's start with the cold, hard cash, or lack of it. This film cost Disney a staggering $270 million to make, and that's before you tack on another $100 million or so for marketing. Opening weekend rolls around in March 2025, and it pulls in just $43 million in the US globally, a measly $87 million. Compare that to the original 1937 Snow White, which raked in over $3 billion when adjusted for inflation, and you've got a flop that's not just bad, it's historic. Even Disney's infamous Dumbo remake from 2019 made $46 million out the gate. By its second weekend, Snow White dropped 66%, barely scraping $14 million. Analysts are whispering losses could hit $115 million or more. This wasn't just a stumble, it was a faceplant on the red carpet. But how did it go so wrong?
To go out and badmouth everybody and talk smack about, older movies in the same franchise, the canon story, I guess?
Yeah.
I don't know, dude. I feel like they would have had better control over that.
This girl took the money and then decided that she wanted to go out there and, you know what, I'm going to take my stand. Well, you should have made that stand before you took the money to promote a film, because that's not in line with your job description.
Right.
Enter Rachel Zegler, the young star cast as Snow White. She's got pipes and charisma, no doubt, but her casting sparked a firestorm from day one. Some fans cried foul over her Latina heritage. Snow White's supposed to be white as snow, right? Disney brushed it off, but then Zegler opened her mouth about the 1937 classic. At a 2022 Expo, she called the original prince a stalker and said the story was outdated, too focused on romance. Fans who grew up loving that gentle fairy tale princess, they weren't having it. Her words lit up social media, with critics accusing her of trashing a legacy, and that was just the beginning of the trouble she'd stir.
I think this is their policies coming back to bite them. They went woke.
Yeah.
She went out and said stuff woke that was going to hurt the film. They couldn't come out and go against her, because then you're going after somebody for saying what you say you believe. But at the same time, I think going forward, they're going to be like, hey, shut up.
Yeah.
Tight-lipped. Otherwise, guess what? We're clawing back some money.
Yeah.
Things got spicier behind the scenes. Word from the set paints a picture of a showdown between Zegler and Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen. These two weren't just acting out a rivalry, they were living it. Insiders say they butted heads over everything from character direction to dialogue. One explosive moment came during the third act, a big fortress showdown with villagers and Snow White's 7 companions. It took 25 takes to get it right, and not because the cameras messed up. Zegler and Gadot couldn't agree on how it should play out, their voices clashing louder than their characters' swords. Crew members watched in silence as the tension boiled over, and what was supposed to be the film's emotional peak turned into a battlefield, but that wasn't the whole story.
I think they could have done all that woke shit. You want to call woke? They could have done all that still. And as long as she had gone out and been like, well, we just have a different story. I like the old story, but we're doing a different one this time.
You're probably right.
The backlash would have been 10 times.
Yes.
You're probably right.
The production itself was a train wreck from the start. 3 rounds of reshoots stretched across years, all to fix a story that kept falling apart. The third act, that fortress scene, got hit hardest. First filmed in 2022, then again in 2024, it was a mess of pacing issues and plot holes. Gadot improvised dark twists for the evil queen, which the director loved, but Zegler felt it stole her thunder. She thought Snow White's heroic moment was getting drowned out, and she wasn't quiet about it. After all that effort, guess what? They cut the whole sequence. Continuity errors and clashing tones made it unusable, leaving Zegler fuming. She called it her best work. Millions spent, months wasted, and the film still felt like a puzzle with missing pieces.
Jonah Platt, whose father helped produce the latest Snow White film, had some very harsh words for star Rachel Zegler. For context, Variety wrote a report recently titled Inside Disney's Snow White Fiasco, Death Threats, Beefed Up Security, and a Social Media Guru for Rachel Zegler.
Then there's the dwarf debacle. Disney ditched the 7 dwarfs for CGI magical creatures after actor Peter Dinklage slammed the original as backward. They wanted to avoid stereotypes, but it backfired big time. The dwarfism community wasn't happy either. Actors like Jason Acuna pointed out it took jobs away from real performers. Fans hated the uncanny CGI goblins too, calling them an unholy VFX disaster. What was supposed to be a progressive move turned into a PR nightmare, with everyone from disability activists to die-hard Disney buffs shaking their heads. And what happened next would shock everyone.
It just takes a beloved movie and makes it much more boring and much less realistic. The movie is really, really bad. But the primary suffering is being sent in by my company to watch a children's movie as a single man, like 2 p.m. on a Thursday. That was the first part that was a little bit weird, but I was basically the only person in the theater.
Disney started to panic. The UK premiere canceled with no explanation. Rumors flew that they were dodging tough questions about the film's chaos. Then came the big one, whispers that Snow White might never hit Disney+. Some say it's about money. Why sink more into a flop? Others think it's brand protection, keeping this mess away from the shiny Disney+ lineup. The studio's been quiet, but scaling back the LA premiere and limiting press access only fueled the fire. For a company built on fairy tale magic, this felt like they were ready to sweep their princess under the rug.
Very few people wanted to see this. Even the little kids who like Disney movies, even they don't seem to be turning up in droves for the movie because the movie is really, really bad. And so I've got some bona fides here on being fair. The movie was absolutely terrible.
Jonah Platt, son of producer Mark Platt, didn't hold back either. He blasted Zegler in a scathing post saying she tanked the film with her politics. He claimed she used promo time to push personal views, like her pro-Palestine stance, that clashed with Disney's family-friendly vibe. Jonah said his dad had to fly across the country to deal with her, and her antics hurt everyone who poured their hearts into the project. It's a rare peek into how personal this flop got for the crew, and it's got people wondering who's really to blame.
In every way that the movie differed from the beloved 1937 original, it was worse. It basically, this movie was like you took the original Snow White and just put everything through this filter of liberalism. It wasn't through a filter of Japanese anime, it was through a filter of liberalism. So from the casting to the class politics, the sexual politics, the regime politics, everything about it was liberal.
Critics and fans piled on too. The film sits at a brutal 44% on Rotten Tomatoes, with reviews calling it exhaustingly awful and painfully muddle-headed. Audiences gave it a B+ cinema score, may at best, and a 74% on the Popcornometer, hardly a rave. Over on IMDb, it's a shocking 1.9 out of 10, with 91% of votes at 1 star by April 2025. Some call it review bombing, tied to Zegler's Trump comments after the 2024 election. She hoped he'd never know peace, but whatever the cause, the hate's real. This wasn't just a movie, it was a punching bag.
Snow White is generally understood to be a very, very white person. And in this case, they decided, nope, no, that doesn't make any sense. So I don't think we're allowed to say that, right? I was referring to the movie as sand beige.
So what's next? Disney's in a bind. They could bury Snow White quietly, letting it fade from theaters and skipping the streaming fanfare. Or they might push it to Disney Plus later, hoping time heals the wounds. Test screenings could shift the tide if word of mouth turns positive, but that feels like a long shot. Zegler's reportedly crushed, feeling her big break slipping away, while Godot's star power might weather the storm. For Disney, this isn't just about one film. It's about whether their remake machines finally run out of steam. One thing's clear, the drama's far from over.
Yeah, this would have been a lot better if they, had a strong male along with her, a prince, if it wasn't about socialism.
It is not racist to suggest that a character who is described in the original as skin white as snow, that is literally how the character is described in the original, that's a character description in the same way that, as you mentioned, in Moana.
Here's the kicker. The original Snow White built Disney into a powerhouse, a symbol of hope and wonder. Now, this 2025 version might be remembered as the moment the magic cracked. Could a studio that's thrived on fairy tales for nearly a century really let one of its biggest icons flop this hard? Or will they find a way to spin this disaster into a comeback? That's the question hanging in the air, and it's one you'll be thinking about long after the credits roll.